Waiting for students to turn up. One girl entered and left. I'm just waiting for somebody to show up. Perhaps the 3 days of holidays have made all the students believe that they needn't attend this class. I don't know what it is. Progress is getting slower and slower because of fewer and fewer people turning up. And on some days, some people turn up. On another day, another set of people turn up, and which means that I'll have to redo what I had already done once, because those who turned up today would not have been there yesterday, and those who were there yesterday are not there today. So this is a difficulty, hoping to cope up with it.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. I think we'll get started because we don't have unlimited time at our disposal. So you are not there in the last class. So let me quickly go through what I was saying. I was talking about Rajyas having come into being, and I was basically connecting the emergence of Rajyas to the Manusmriti. Now, it is commonly believed that the Manusmriti is an ancient text, as ancient as the Vedas and everything that came out of the Vedas. But in fact, that is really not the case. The Manusmriti is dated somewhere between 1250 BCE or before Common Era and 1000 BCE, whereas the Vedas go back more than 10,000 years, and therefore we have to remember that the Manusmriti is a later edition. Now, one of the things that I want all of you to remember is this fact that you cannot create a unified body of knowledge where everything is consistent with everything else. Okay, that is because of the fact that this is a knowledge that has evolved over literally not centuries but millennia. It has evolved over millennia, and most of the time it was done through the transmission. I mean, the knowledge transmission was done through word of mouth, and every storytelling tells a new side to the story sometimes because interpretations come in. So there is, even though we try to say there is a thing called Sanatana Dharma, uh, if you look at, if you become a philologist is one who not only studies written documents but also looks into the origins of how knowledge is transmitted from generation to generation by word of mouth. So if you look at this, you will find that a number of additions and deletions have taken place in what came to be called Sanatana Dharma. And there are things in that which don't sit well together. When I was talking to you about the Janapadas, I had talked to you about there being, and this you find the reference to the Janapadas as early as the Rig Veda. And Rig Veda basically says that there are chieftains who are elected by the people, and there is also a Samiti which later gained Panchayat Samiti because 5 people were chosen. Panchayat comes from Panch, which is 5. So these people were taken from, I mean, there were 5 people in the Samiti, and therefore it became a Panchayat Samiti. They were usually well read people, scholars who understood the Dharma Shastras. Now, when we talk about the Dharma Shastras, most of the Dharma Shastras are supposed to have come out of the Vedas, but the Manu Dharma Shastra is a subject of huge controversy. The first thing about the Manu Dharma Shastra is that it is so much newer compared to the Vedic period. And the other thing that you see in the Manusmriti is that it seems to have come into being at a time when the transition from Janapadas and Mahajanapadas to Rajyas had taken place. And this Manusmriti uh, is supposed to have introduced the concept of the Dvija. A Dvija is twice born. Twice born is somebody whose first born is his actual birth. The second birth is the thread ceremony or the Upanayana. People say that there is no evidence of the Dvija in any of the Vedic texts or the Upanishads, Vedangas, all of which have been derived out of the Vedas. This is credited exclusively to the Manusmriti. And Manusmriti also introduced a hierarchy, apparently, where the Shudras were at the bottom. And in this, what Manu says is, in a kingdom that is ruled by Shudras, the Dvijas should not live. The Dvijas are the top 3 Varnas: the Brahmin, The Sanskrit pronunciation of Brahmin is Brahmin, and the Kshatriya and the Vaishya are supposed to be not living in a kingdom that is ruled by a Shudra who's a non-Dvija. So this is one of the things that he's supposed to have said. The other thing that we find apparently in the Manusmriti is the idea of lineage of kings. I told you the Manusmriti was written at the time when the transition to the Rajyas happened. So kings became kings because their father was a king. So this is the hereditary principle. Some people also call it the lineage principle. So in the Manusmriti, there is no reference to the Panchayat Samiti, and there is no reference to a leader elected by the people, which was there in the Janapadas, and which is why I told you they were the first folk republics anywhere in the world. So this is absent in the Manusmriti. But there is a problem with Manusmriti also. The problem with the Manusmriti is that there are apparently more than 50 versions of what is supposed to be the Manusmriti. There are 50 versions or more. Okay, the most common version of the Manusmriti was found by a British philologist, Philo uh, Logist, philologist, and he claims that this Manusmriti was found near what we call Kolkata today in English. The Bengalis call it Kolikata, but actually speaking, and we are told that Calcutta, okay, which was the name which we grew up uh, using. Calcutta is a corruption of uh, Kolikata, and therefore they changed it to Kolkata. We are also told that Bombay is a corruption of Mumbai because there was a Mumba Devi temple, and so it is Mumbai which became Bombay. But the truth of the matter is, these are not, neither is Kolikata or Kolkata the original name of the place, nor is Mumbai the original name of Bombay. Bombay is a discovery of the Portuguese, even though the British later on built the gateway into India. And in the Portuguese language, Bombay means a good bay, a good harbor for ships to come. That's what Bombay means. And this was a name given by the Portuguese, used extensively by everyone else, including the English. And It is only after the Shiv Sena decided that they didn't want an anglicized name through a corruption of history, it became Mumbai. But otherwise, Bombay is not a corruption of Mumbai. Mumbai is a new name completely. Bombay was never called Mumbai before the Shiv Sena named it Mumbai. Similarly with Calcutta. Calcutta derives its name from William Jones's interpretation of a text by a particular scholar who lived in that area, whose name was Kullu Kullukata, Kullu with an accent, a line on top of the second U, which means you have to stretch it. Kullu Katha. And Kullu Katha basically is the narrative of this man called, this scholar called Kulluka. So Kullu Katha was pronounced by William Jones as Calcutta. It was pronounced by him as Calcutta, and it had nothing to do with Kolikata, which I am told is a palm leaf. I don't know how true that is. I cannot vouch for it. Kolkata or Kolikata means it's a palm leaf, they say. I am not sure of the veracity of this claim. But what is important is that Kullu Katha is taken today as probably the most definitive version of the not Kullukata, Kulluka's version is taken as the most definitive version of the Manusmriti. Now, you must also remember that Manusmriti is a slightly newer name because originally the fragments of the text that were found by William Jones, they talk about it as being Manava Dharma Shastra. Okay, a Dharma Shastra for human beings. Manava is human. Manava Dharma Shastra. But over a period of time, people realized that there were a lot of contradictions between this Manava Dharma Shastra and the original Dharma Shastras and the Dharma Sutras that were there in the Dharma Shastras of the Vedic period. And therefore, they gave it the name Manusmriti. So, the Smriti part is something that happened in the 17th, 18th centuries. Okay. And Manu also came into focus only around this particular time. Now, what is interesting is, though William Jones makes the argument that Kulluka was the one who was probably the definitive interpreter of the Manusmriti from among all the 50 odd interpretations that we are supposed to be seeing. He is not very right here because yet another fragment that is supposed to have been found much before him by Govindaraja that has a slightly different version than what you see in Kullukas. What is the main difference? The main difference that you find in the Manusmriti uh, that Govindaraja found was, and the later on versions, is the principle of lineage. Okay, the principle of lineage is what you see in that particular version. And then subsequently, people found an even more ancient version, which is credited to Medhatita, Medha, again with a line on top of the 8. So you have to stretch Medhatita. Now, Medhatita was a rishi, and he made the first changes to the Manusmriti. One of the most important changes that he made was that he removed the Dvija system. He also removed the hereditary occupation of the throne of a Rajya and said that it is a system that we find in Rig Veda that we have to go back to, which is elect a chieftain and have him govern with the help of a council of advisors, which is the Samiti. He advocated that. And being a rishi, he also advocated what is called Nishkama Karma. He said the ruler, whoever that may be, from whichever varna he may come, should be able to detach himself from his actions as a ruler. He should be able to detach himself from the actions and only look at the end goal. The end goal is a dharmic goal. It should be in accordance with dharma. So, Raja Dharma is supposed to have been first used by Medhatiti. Okay. And the change he made is that there is no lineage, there is no Dvija, nothing. Now, the next one was the one that I have been talking about so far, which is Kulluka. Kulluka believed, he also said no Dvija system, but he found that the Rajas had become too big to now have elected chieftains and a Samiti. So, what he advocated essentially is that Rajya should be ruled by a person who wields the most power and influence over his subjects, a person who can influence his subjects. But this also has to be done in a dharmic way. So he believed that a Raja who is ascending to the throne should be well versed in the craft of war, and he should be well versed in the Dharma Shastras, not the Manu Dharma Shastra, but the original Dharma Shastras and the sutras that they had. And he should be uh, benevolent towards his people. But if the necessity came, he should have enough raudra, anger, revenge spirit if the kingdom was attacked by someone else. So he's talking about some kind of a uh, system wherein the most powerful person, the bravest, the courageous person, will take control of a kingdom. This is what you find in Kulluka's work. Kulluka actually wrote a work which is titled Manavarta Muktavali. Manavarta Muktavali is what he called. And William Jones says that this is probably the world's first constitution. The Manavarta Muktavali is something like a constitution, because Manu himself had given so many do's and don'ts which are otherwise absent in Hinduism or in Sanatana Dharma. In the Vedic period, it is left to the individual and his vichakshana jnana. Everything there is jnana. You should have jnana. Here in Manu, you find these other prescriptions. So William Jones actually says this is probably the first constitution of the world. Now, the interesting thing is that he believes that Kulluka's version, which is the Manavarta Muktavali, is that version of the Manusmriti which should be considered as the definitive version. And so this version of the Manusmriti was for many years, it was called the Calcutta Manusmriti. Now it's being called Kolkata Manusmriti. Otherwise, Didi will hit us all properly. But the revisions into these documents were first created, like I said, by Rishi Medhati, who wrote a bhashya, okay, bhashyam in Sanskrit, but we can say bhashya in Hindi. A bhashya is also a commentary. He wrote the first commentary on it and said there are a number of things in this which are unsustainable, and therefore they have to be eliminated. So the Dvija system, like I said, was eliminated, and the idea that you had to be from a certain varna to be a king was eliminated. Lineage as the reason for ascending to the throne was eliminated. So this bhashya by Medhatiti is considered to be today by Indian scholars, it is considered to be more important than the Calcutta version or the Kulluka's version, which is, like I told you, the Manavarta Muktavali. This version, some people say, is a better version. Now, Kulluka himself, actually his full name is Kulluka Bhatta. Kulluka Bhatta, Bhatta. Okay. And before going back to Kulluka, let me also give you a little bit of information about Medhatiti. The Medhatiti Bhashya on the Manusmriti also contains sections on Ayurveda, one of the Upavedas, the four Upavedas. It contains a version of that. And in this, what is the most interesting feature, even though it is not related to our subject, I thought you should know what is the most important feature, is that Medhatiti considered water, regular clean water, to be beneficial to people's health. He said most of the diseases that human beings have can be washed away through the consumption of the water. Okay, so he gave it water, he gave the same status as what Shushruta gave to Somarasa. Okay, so same this thing he gave to that. But let's not go into more of that. And I have told you that Kulluka Bhatta has said whatever he had to say. But he believed that the Manusmriti had more benevolence than malevolence. Benevolence is doing good, malevolence is doing bad. So today, when you read about the Manusmriti, there are a number of interpretations of it which say that there are horrible punishments prescribed by Manu and all that, which apparently are not there. And this is what one can find by studying Kulluka's version, which he sees as being a benevolent version, except for the fact that he disagreed with the Dvija and with the idea of hereditary kingship. Then I had told you another name the other day. His name is Vijnaneshwara, Vijnanesvara. Vijnaneshwara, who wrote a commentary of his own on the Manusmriti. He called it Mitakshara. And this commentary, Mitakshara, using few words only. Okay, he said that if you write a commentary about the Manusmriti by using too many words, then you will generate a lot of controversy around it. So he said, use the minimum possible words in order to convey the ideas of the Manusmriti. And what we see from the Mitakshara by Vijnaneshwara is also the removal of the Dvija system and the removal of the hereditary principle. And he seems to be like Kulluka in saying that the person with most power should become the ruler of a Rajya or a kingdom. Then there are also other, what should we say? There are also other versions of this, of the Manusmriti, one of which was written by Bharuchi, Bharuci, but C is written with a dot. So that is Chi, not Bharuci, it is Bharuchi. Bharuchi wrote a book called Manushastra Vivarana, and today scholars believe that it is Bharuchi who, in the Vivarana is description of the Manu Shastra, as he called it. It is not a Shastra. He was the one who was instrumental in introducing all these perversions that we today associate with the Manu Smriti. So Bharuchi's version apparently was countered by Kulluka. And Kulluka said Bharuchi is not correct in his interpretation, because all these things that he is talking about in what he called the Manushastra Vivarana are not there in the Manushastra at all. And then you will also find a couple of other people. One who is called Devana Bhatta, who wrote a book on the Manusmriti called the Smriti Chandrika. And Devana Bhatta argues that Manusmriti does not divide people, it does not make punishments that are there in Bharuchi. He says the document that we find is nothing but a benevolent document which urges the rulers to rule as per the principle of dharma, and he highlights non-violence. He says the Manusmriti contains all forms of non-violence in it. This is the contribution made by Devana Bhatta. Okay, and then Kashinatha Upadhyaya wrote his own commentary on this, which was called Dharma Sindhusara. And while writing the Dharma Sindhusara, he also pointed out that there have been a lot of other things that have been added on to the Manusmriti, and you can't basically malign this particular document. These are not new scholars, these are old scholars. Okay, but all of them agree that dharma is central. Dharma sutras are central to the Manusmriti and to the ideas of how to rule. They are central to Manusmriti, and these are not based in any kind of discrimination. They say these are additions made by some Brahmin scholars for their benefit. So people say Manu did not write anything original. What Manu did was that he studied the Dharma Shastras, and from that he drew out some sutras. Sutras are principles. The Dharma Sutras he drew out are from the Vedic Dharma Shastras which preceded him. Though he did talk about lineage and all that, they say that, but it is not a text which is malicious. Now, Gandhi first understood non-violence from the Manusmriti. But he said, with all these 50 documents and with all these, I'm talking about Mahatma Gandhi, he said, with all these 50 documents, there are so many contradictions between one thing that Manu says here and another thing that Manu says there. So he says, if you uphold one of these as the principle, then you will have to discard the rest. So what he actually said is that take this non-violence and Sanatana Dharma ruling from the Manusmriti and discard the rest because they are controversial. There is no controversy in this. And he also advised that Kullu Kathas and uh, Devana Datta's Bhattas, sorry, Devana Bhattas are the more reliable interpretations. So Rajyas came into being in this way. So tomorrow